Second part in our sharpening series. Today we're going to turn this lot into this. That sounds good. Stick around. So welcome back. In the last video we had a look at the grinder and we set the grinder up, and remember that was the first step in our sharpening sequence. Now once I've got the primary bevel established on my blades, the grinder's finished. You put it where you don't really need to touch it again until you need to reset the primary bevel. That's not the thing that makes our tools sharp. It's this technique here, combination of diamond stones that I tend to use and a combination of a leather strop that I tend to use as well, that gives me that fine cutting edge I want on all my blades. These are diamond stones. Other stones are available. I like diamond stones because they stay flat and they get my tools sharp. Initially they're quite an expensive outlay, but they do last for a long time and they do give you good results. I have 4 diamond stones. I have an extra coarse, a coarse, a medium and a fine. Grit wise, the extra coarse is about 150 grit. The coarse is about 250 grit. The medium is about 600 grit, and then the fine is about 1200 grit, and that gets you to a very good sharp blade. I then tend to use leather strops, and we're able to make some strops today, and then I use honing compound, and I've got 2 honing compounds I use. I've got a 5000 grit compound and an 8000 grit compound. So by the time you've taken your blades through that, working on what's known as a secondary bevel, you've really got a sharp edge that is good for what we need it to do. Now historically I just grab a plate, bang it on the bench and use it. I have an old leather strop that's used and abused, again just bang on the bench, and I use it to keep my tools sharp. But I want to do something a bit better than that while I've got some spare time in my hands. So I've got some MDF here. This is 18mm MDF of whatever size that is. Got some scrap 9mm MDF as well. And what I want to do is to insert these diamond plates into the board and then make a couple of leather strops that I can insert into the board here. I can then store this on the wall here, on my quick grab wall, so it's easy to get hold of, put it on the bench and sharpen the tools, as well as having it resting on the far end of the bench while I'm using hand tools so I can quickly touch up blades during use. So today we're going to make that sharpening station. Got a few things on the bench here. We've got the Veritas Mark II honing guide that we're not going to be using today. We'll use that in the next episode when we actually get to sharpening our tools in anger. Now interestingly, the Mark II guide is already causing quite a lot of conversations in the community, and if you've got experience of this one, drop a comment and let me know how you get on. People are telling me they struggle with that particular system to get a square edge on your blade. So we're not going to use the guide today, so we'll put that on one side for future reference. I've got an offcut here of 18mm MDF. I've got some glue. I've got some lapping fluid. Again, we're not using that today. That's for the next episode. I've got a 20mm router bit and a whatever size router bit that is, and that's purely to make the recesses. I've got some leather here, scrap leather. I've got some 9mm MDF here and just some more offcuts just in case I need them. Now job one is I want to make the leather strops because they need a bit of time to dry. Now I'm going to make 3 strops, and all my strops are going to be the same size as my diamond plates. So I want to cut 3 bits of MDF the same size as this plate here. So now we've got 3 MDF blanks. When it comes to making leather strops, leather has 2 sides. It has this nice finish here that tends to go on the outside, and this sort of suede finish here. When you're using honing compounds, it's a suede finish that you want to put your compound on. The suede tends to hold the compound, and then you rely on the grit of this. Now I have been told that this side is also incredibly good for stropping, and it's finer than 8000. No idea what it is, but it's a very fine leather and is great for just polishing and finishing off your surface. Now I want to cut out 3 pieces of leather that are slightly bigger than our surface. So if we were to do one about there, I'm using Evo stick contact adhesive, so you cover both surfaces with the contact adhesive, let it go off and then stick it together. 10 minutes in, I'll take my leather, carefully lay it on top, just stretching it a little bit, spare piece of MDF, And now I can just make sure that's all nice and neat. You will get this slight bit of bleed out on your glue at the edges, and that's why we cut it oversized, because that will cut out. What we don't want is glue on this surface, of course. Just going to make a little bit of a sandwich here. And that's just to make sure that everything clamps down reasonably well. And I can just leave that lot to dry off, and it should all come out beautifully. Next step is I want to weigh up where I'm going to put these diamond plates. Now some of these, I've got these little rubber feet on, so I just want to take those off because we don't need those. Now 3 of these plates are the same thickness, but the extra coarse one is somewhat thinner. So these are nominally 9mm and this is nominally 6mm. So let's weigh this up where this is going to go. I'm going to put these nominally 25mm in from the edge and nominally 25mm apart. It's not precise, but I just think that's going to give us a nice border and somewhere for the slurry to go. Now coincidentally, a standard steel rule is about 25mm, about an inch. So I can just use that to weigh up where these are going to go in relationship to each other. So there's enough room on this board for my 4 diamond plates and my 2 strops that I know I'm going to use with paste. Remember, we've made 3 strops, one with the shiny leather side up. No idea whether that's going to work or not, that leather side up. It's just something I read and something that a friend of mine mentioned as well. So what I want to do is just to leave that separate as a standalone strop. Then if it does work, I can just leave it on the bench, and when I'm working, I can just use that one strop to quickly bring that edge back. If it doesn't work, nothing lost. I do know that my 4 plates and my 2 strops work. It's my tried and tested technique for sharpening blades. So this is what I want on my board. 4 diamonds and 2 strops. So that inch spacing, that 25mm spacing is pretty damn perfect. So I can now lay this board out ready for the recessing. Now to recess these, I'm going to use a 12.7mm router bit and some sort of right size coping ring on my router. I think from memory this is 13mm, but we'll come back to that. And the idea is you make a frame that allows for the offset of your router bit and your coping ring that gives you the right sizes that you need. And scrap MDF will get you where you need to be, and pocket hole screws are perfect for this, so just make this to the right size. Now I do quite a lot of this recess type work, so some time ago I invested in the MFS 400. Other manufacturers now make similar sort of tools for this one, and they are a good investment if you do this type of work. So we're going to use this one, but as I say, you can make your own using MDF scraps. So sizing this is really easy. You bang your plate in the middle, i.e. the size we want to do, and close that up. Now we need to allow for the offset of the router bit and the coping ring here. Now when we cut this, the coping ring here is going to run round the edge of our template, be it the MDF one or the Festool one. But the cutting point is actually on the router bit itself. And you can see there's an offset between the outside cutting edge of the router bit and that coping ring. So it's not going to cut here at the coping ring, it cuts here on the router bit. So obviously we need to allow for that offset. The easiest way to work out what that offset is to make a cut in something and measure it. So to work out the offset, I'm going to take a scrap piece of MDF, clamp a straight edge onto it. It doesn't really matter where. And just make sure that the straight edge is long enough so you've got some clear area in the middle so you can actually take a pass with your machine. Take a pencil and then draw a line right down the edge of that straight edge. Bottom out the router, give yourself a small depth of cut, and then your offset is the distance between the line that you drew and the shoulder that you cut, which is awesome. And we're looking at an offset here of about 2 millimeters. So you want to make your cutout 2 millimeters on all sides to allow for the offset of the router to give you the perfect recess for your plate. Or in other words, 2 plus 2, so 2 on this side and 2 on this side is 4. So the width of your plate plus 4 millimeters, the length of your plate plus 4 millimeters. So I can drop my plate in here, snug everything up, and I can now take a reading from here. So here I've got 6.3, so I need to make this 6.3, 6.7, so I'm going to adjust this out now to 6.7, which is there. So I've got a length here of 285, 678, 288, so if I make that 292, that allows for about 4 millimeters in that direction. I do like this square. It's a bit of a luxury item in a shop, but I don't regret buying it. Okay, so in theory I can now use this to make my recess that will fit my plate. So while we've got some scrap MDF here, why not try that and see? And there you go. Perfect fit. Wow, like that. We're going to take it deeper. Don't think that's quite deep enough, but the size is bang on. This plate here isn't actually square, so it's a bit of a weird shape, so it doesn't quite fit in. But we'll fix that with a chisel when we come to final refinement. But everything else is looking good. Happy days. So we can just now go ahead and recess all of these. This is our 25mm line from the edge, and we know we've got a 2mm offset on this one. So rather than lining up my gauge with that line, I want to actually line this up 2mm back from that to allow for the offset. We'll put a square down this edge to make sure it's all square, and we'll just eye it to make sure that the two side lines are centre, and that's going to be good enough for what we need here, I think. So let's just do a line 2 millimeters in. So I'm just lining the top edge against that 23mm mark that we just made, getting it more or less centre. That's good enough. And just making sure that we are more or less square. So there we go, there's all our recesses done. I've squared all the edges off. I made a mistake on this one, I went too deep. I forgot this was thinner. Even though I discussed it, I forgot that this was actually thinner. But it will still work for us. It's still slightly proud, which is all I care about. So I'm going to live with that. And every time I use it, I'll just look at the mistakes that I made. But we're okay. However, these do fit in incredibly tightly. So I just want to make some little finger pulls here, and then I can just simply use a screwdriver to leverage those out if I ever want to remove these again. Now this is also a 12.7mm, same diameter as the one we've already used, just got the dome on top. And we know we've got the 2mm offset because we measured that before. So if I take 12.7 and divide it by 2, it's roughly about 6.35. So we're going to call that 6. So I'll take my straight edge 6mm back from these reveals, and I'll add 2 millimeters to it, so 8-ish millimeters sounds good to me. Just using the second straight edge just to give me a bit of support on the router. And by eye, I'm just going to roughly line the router up in the centre of the channel. Some days you just don't flow, do you? Another mistake here I went too deep on this one, but I've got away with it. So, in theory, this should now slot nicely into there. And when I want to bring it out, screwdriver goes into the thumb hole and it just leverages out quite nicely. This one's a bit tight, so I'm just going to finesse it ever so slightly. All the stones are now refined and put into their final homes. I've got these little pulls here so I can get those out if required. Made the error on this end stone here, went too deep on it, but it's still proud of the surface, so I'm going to get away with that. So I just now want to put the two strops in there. These are out the clamps, nicely glued. Not going to use them just yet because they're not quite where they need to be. Sharp knife, trim off the leather. And there you go, 3 strops. So there you go, everything is nice and firm, all held into place using good old friction. I've got the finger pulls at the front so I can get a screwdriver underneath there to pull those out. Extra coarse, medium, fine, super fine, super fine once I've got the paste on that. Just want to trim this front edge off here. And there you go, we have the basics of a sharpening system. You can get a lot fancier than this, but all I want to do is to hold everything in place nice and firmly so it's safe and not rattling around. And something I can just grab, bang underneath the bench for storage that I can just then quickly pull out when I want to use it, and that's exactly what I've got here. Just a couple of things to do. I'm just going to drop all these stones out. I'm just going to rub all these markings off here that we made, give it a coat of wax, let that dry off. Just allow these to dry for 24 hours or so, so I've got a good bonding of the leather to the MDF underneath that. And then that is it. In the next episode, we'll put this through its paces. We'll take some plane irons, we'll take some chisels, we'll use the grinder to put the 30-degree bevel on that. We'll then use this system to hold that bevel and then to use the strops to give it its final polishing, its final sharpening. And in theory, everything is super fast, super quick, super easy, and super sharp. Will it work? Who knows? Find out next episode. See you then.